Today, I am excited to talk to LaMonika Jones, who is the Director of State Initiatives at the Food Research and Action Center, also known as FRAC. LaMonika oversees the work of DC Hunger Solutions, Maryland Hunger Solutions, and the New Jersey Food Security Initiative, which are all initiatives of FRAC. LaMonika, so great to see you again. Thanks so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
So much has been going on with the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Can you get us all up to speed? Because I feel like every day there's something new or dismal happening.
Dismal is a good word. Where we are right now, in terms of what's just happened, I believe maybe since Friday, is the higher courts, the district courts, um, released a judgment. Rhode Island and Massachusetts released their decision that the administration had to fully fund SNAP benefits for the month of November. So that would be all $8 billion. Of course, the administration appealed that decision. They appealed to the Supreme Court, and Justice Jackson issued a response. Like I said, sometime I believe it was over this weekend. It may have even come early this morning with the amount of news that's been going on.
Right.
Um, she issued her judgment, which it was an administrative response that pushed the decision back to the first district court. And the first district court released their response to the stay that the administration requested, in saying that they denied the stay. So essentially, the USDA, as well as this administration, they must fully fund SNAP, utilizing all the contingency funds, as well as any additional transfer authority that they have to fully fund the benefit. They must fully fund these SNAP
Mhm.
benefits for November. What we have not received, and then my last check, I don't know if there is a response that the administration has issued. I don't know what would come from that. I'm not sure of the next step, but that's where we are right now, in terms of the full funding that, we have been requesting, that states have been advocating for from USDA. Outside of that, we've been hearing, and I've heard over the weekend, that states have started the process of issuing their benefits. I heard as early as Saturday, when the district court in Rhode Island and Massachusetts first handed down the decision. States went ahead and they allocated those benefits to those states. Here in Maryland, our the governor allocated $62 million of local funds to administer benefits. So beginning tomorrow, our SNAP clients here in Maryland will receive 50% of their benefit, and that will start with the folks that receive their benefit first, the 1st through the 10th. And so it'll start with those that should have received it come November 1st, and then it'll continue on, as well as any of our older adults age 60 and over who are eligible to receive that, who are receiving SNAP, but then also receive the 50% supplement. They will
Mhm.
receive their full supplement, local supplement amount, come tomorrow as well.
Okay.
And in
Okay.
DC, we've already heard from clients that they've already begun to receive their November SNAP benefits, as Mayor Bowser utilized reserve funds for SNAP and WIC benefits for the month of November.
Okay. Thank you, LaMonica. I know it's complicated and it's changing literally hour to hour and day to day. Can you talk about the impact that the delay has had on SNAP clients, SNAP recipients?
Absolutely. So the biggest thing, that our households are concerned about, and it's the whole reason why SNAP was even created. SNAP is our nation's largest safety net program. It is our first line of defense against hunger. And so as, families begin to prepare for the holidays, even as, just the benefits begin to run out, because you received your benefits the 1st of October. Families are really concerned with, how am I going to do what is very, very basic, which is feed myself and my family.
Right, right.
When we look at who is receiving SNAP benefits, after our individual households the greatest number of households or individuals that are receiving benefits are children. Here in Maryland, out of the 680,000 clients that are receiving benefits, 270,000 of those are children under the age of 18.
Wow.
And in
Wow.
Maryland and in DC, it's 50,000 of those. So,
Wow.
you know, our children are receiving, the vast majority of our benefits. And so parents and guardians begin to think, okay, my benefit, I'm used to receiving my benefit, the first of the month or a couple days thereafter. How am I going to, what am I going to utilize to cover meals, dinner? What am I going to utilize to prepare meals on the weekends? We
Hmm.
have fall breaks that are still popping up, and so some
Right,
parents have
right,
fall breaks. We just had an election day in various jurisdictions, and so in certain places, schools close that day, so that means that there's no school meals that day. Um, and we have the holidays coming up. So we'll have Thanksgiving break that is
yeah,
coming up. And what are we going to do for Thanksgiving dinner? What are we going to do for the days that my child is not in school, which we're looking at possibly Wednesday through the following Monday? And so families, are really concerned, and we're unnecessarily pushing people further into food insecurity that they have done everything that they are supposed to do. They have followed the work requirements. They meet the household size and income
right,
eligibility requirements. They've, done all the recertifications, submitted their paperwork. They're doing everything that they are supposed to do, yet they're penalized for being poor, being low income, and for being food insecure. And it's just not fair to them. And so that's a lot of the questions that I hear and that I receive is I've done everything. All I want to do is feed my family. I've stand in the lines. I go to the food banks. I visit food pantries. I do all of the things that I'm supposed to do. I work, you know, but I still need support. And that's why we have SNAP and that's why we have WIC, but families are still concerned. It's getting colder outside. There's being changes to LIHEAP, which is allows for deductions and assistance to pay your utilities. I always say the rent eats first. And so
right,
after households have paid their mortgage or their rent and they've purchased medication, they've paid for childcare. We have one of the highest rates of childcare in the entire nation here in the DMV region.
right.
After we've done all that, then I have to figure out how am I going to feed myself and my family. And that's all parents are concerned about. And for a lot of parents, for a lot of households, I will go without so that my children do not. And you shouldn't have to make those types of decisions.
No, those choices are not choices at all. I have said this before on this podcast. We are punishing people because they are poor, and the cruelness of this is beyond me. Um, FRAC has called this saga a cautionary tale for the Trump administration. What can you explain why?
This is, our programs were created as SNAP and WIC were created out of a response to support our households and families that are experiencing food insecurity, that are low income. And what we've currently seen is politicization of food. Food is a very basic human right. I always tell people, food safety and shelter. Those are Maslow's hierarchy of needs, very
Right,
basic hierarchy of needs. We have to meet food safety and shelter before we can begin to discuss other things. And unfortunately, what has happened in the course of this year is that food has been politicized, and it shouldn't be.
right.
Food is something that everybody needs, regardless of how you identify, regardless of, you know, political alignment. It doesn't matter. We all have to eat. And what we've seen um, here lately is that food is being players are determining, who's going to eat, and it shouldn't be that way. Everyone should be able to access food. They should be able to purchase food. Um, they should be able to do whatever it is that they need to do according to what's best for their own household and what's best for their own family. Only thing that we ask is that knowing that we have households, we have individuals who are our veterans, they are disabled, there are many different dynamics at play. Not every SNAP household is the same. They may
Right.
appear the same, but every household has different factors and different things that are going on. Only thing that we ask is that the USDA do what is right by our families and do what this program is designed to do, which is to be a safety net, to support families and to support households. And what we're continuing to see is that low income households and individuals that are experiencing food insecurity are continuously forced to feel the brunt of what's happening, and they shouldn't be. They shouldn't have.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You mentioned earlier that people on SNAP are working, and I think there's a lot of misconceptions. And you also mentioned, our U.S. Secretary, our Department of Agriculture, and U.S. Secretary of Agriculture Brooke Rollins called SNAP, and I quote, bloated, broken, dysfunctional, and corrupt. And so I think there are so many misconceptions. One about the SNAP program itself, and two about SNAP recipients. These are hardworking folks. These are Americans who are doing their best. And I think it's really important to dispel that misconception. Sorry, LaMonika, but I just want to go back to, these are hardworking Americans. These are not people who are, trying to deceive the system in any way.
Yeah, so those are all that's all stigma and untruths. The vast majority of households that are receiving SNAP are working. And if a household is not working, we have to look at the extenuating circumstances there that are at play. For example, with the changing work requirements that went into effect November 1st, a household, an individual that is between the ages of 18 and 64, previously it was 18 and 50 to 54, those households are now required to follow work requirements, meaning they must work at least 80
Right.
hours per month, either through traditional work, um, a um, a work fair or a volunteer program, or through a SNAP employment and training program. Also, if you have a child that is in the home that is 14, a dependent is now a child that is 14 and under. Previously, it was all children 18 and under. So if you are a household and you have a child that is 15 years old, that child is no longer considered a dependent, and that household now must follow work requirements. Um, Unless there's also like a 15 and maybe a 4-year-old in the house, then the family doesn't have to follow those
Sure.
work requirements. So there's a little bit of nuance there. But what this doesn't take into account is this. If I have a 15, 16-year-old in the house, but let's say my child is ill. Let's say, and I have to take off work. Let's say I have to take off work because, I have to take an older parent to a doctor's appointment. All these different factors in play. I run the risk if I'm unable to meet that 80 hours per week, I run the risk, or 80 hours per month, I run the risk of losing access to SNAP benefits, all
Yeah.
because I have a family dynamic that requires me to be flexible and to shift my schedule and time to accommodate my family's needs. Family, in my opinion, families come first. You do whatever you can to support your family. And so if I have a child
Right.
that I have to pick up from childcare or school, or if I have a parent teacher meeting, or if I have a doctor's appointment, or if I have a parent that is that has to be taken to an appointment, um, I'm going to do that because I want to make sure that my family is taken care of. But I'm also running the risk of losing out on a SNAP benefit. And it shouldn't be that way.
Right.
Same myth that is often shared about our undocumented households. The uh, the assumption is that our undocumented households are accessing benefits illegally. That is not true. Our undocumented households are not eligible for a large number of our programs. There's a large number of federal programs that they are not eligible for. Previously for SNAP, it was unless you had a child that was in the house that was 5 years or younger.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we're looking at a lot of stigma, a lot of assumption, and a lot of untruths, and lumping in that when we talk about SNAP fraud. SNAP fraud is a very, very, very small percentage of the overall number of SNAP cases in our country. I want to say something like 2%. I'll have to fact check that, but I believe it's like 2%. Very, very,
Sure.
very small percentage. And so there's a lot of stigma, there's a lot of assumption, and there's a lot of untruths. And unfortunately, um, as that message is communicated, individuals that are not familiar with the SNAP process begin to pick up on that and assume like this makes sense, so it must be true, when in fact it's not. It is very difficult for a SNAP client, for someone who is experiencing food insecurity, the amount of information they have to provide to the state agency in order to receive benefits, it's quite lengthy.
Right.
There's income verification, there's dependent information that you have to provide. There's a whole swath of information that you have to prepare that number one is very bureaucratic and individuals should not have to provide that much information, but they do. And
Right.
that's in order to maintain integrity of our programs and to ensure accountability of our households that are utilizing benefits. So the assumption that people are not working, the assumption that people are not following the rules from the client up to the retailer is very much untrue, and it further perpetuates the stigma and the myth, the negative myth and the negative assumptions about SNAP that are untrue and unfounded.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for clarifying all of that. You mentioned, how states were stepping in, what Governor Westmore in Maryland has done. But what states are doing right now, will that be enough to help people, over the short term and over the long term?
Absolutely not. You know, when a state every year, when a state comes together with their state legislature and they, put forth a budget, they're not factoring in, SNAP benefits because a SNAP benefit is 100% federally funded. So why would I be factoring into my local budget a federal benefit that has been covered since its inception? Why I'm
Yeah,
not doing that. And so what states are having to do right now and what we're seeing is that they are utilizing reserve funds that are reserved for a reason, for a true emergency. Now, this is an emergency, but it is a forced emergency that they
yep,
didn't have to be in if USDA would have utilized their contingency funds that they are legally authorized to utilize, as well as the transfer authority to move additional monies over to this account so that we can ensure that all $8 billion is funded. Unfortunately, states have been forced to respond to this as if it were an emergency and utilize the reserve funds that they have in place for, let's say, a weather-related emergency or other emergencies that may come up to support residents within their state. And so, what we've
yeah,
done, for example, in Maryland is the governor has allocated $62 million of their local reserve funds to support our SNAP clients. And it's commendable, because the governor wants to make sure that our clients are taken care of, that they have access to their benefits, that people are able to do what, again, is very basic, which is feed themselves, go to the grocery store, feed
right,
myself and my family. And
right.
they should not have to. They should not have to utilize their rainy day funds in order to do that. But the fact of the matter is, we're still in November. We're still debating over November benefits, and we have December that we have to think about now if we
Yeah,
don't end the shutdown soon or if USDA does not step up. So no state has the bandwidth financially to support the amount of money that it takes to support our SNAP clients. And as we run the risk of food insecurity rates increasing as the longer we go and shut down, the more furloughed workers that we have, as the federal government has issued an astronomical number of RFID notices since the beginning of
right,
the year, as we creep into the holidays where food insecurity rates and requests for food assistance, as well as utility assistance, tend to increase, we're running the risk of states having to respond in a greater way to offset that because we don't have the support from the federal government to do what it is that they are legally authorized and should be doing,
right.
which is supporting our households through SNAP and other means.
Yeah, it's a good reminder to remember that this is legally authorized. It's illegal what they're doing right now. Um,
They are legally they are the administering agency for SNAP and a whole host of other federal nutrition programs. It is within their legal authority to ensure that contingency funds are utilized to support our SNAP clients. Back in 2018, when we were in a shutdown, the similar situation with our shutdown, USDA did that. They said contingency funds would be
right,
available if states utilize local funds. We never had to get to that point, but they acknowledge that there
right,
are contingency funds. This go around, it's not happening.
right. You mentioned, states, can't pick up the slack that will, that will run out very quickly. In the same way, charities and food banks will not be able to step in and fill this void either, right?
Exactly, exactly. We're already seeing, I'm hearing conversations of food banks saying our wait list for receiving a food box is going to be sometime in December. It's going to be closer to Thanksgiving. People have a need now.
God,
And, again, commend states that are stepping up. The governor,
right,
Westmore, he also allocated $10 million to emergency food response. There's others that are stepping in. We've seen a large response here in the DMV with donors stepping up, with local jurisdictions stepping up. Baltimore City stepped up, Montgomery County City Council, they stepped up. Number of individuals, even across the entire country, are stepping in to ensure that our food
right.
banks and their food banking partners, our food pantries, have the support. But the need is greater than the resource and the capacity to ensure that all of our households have that. And so we're haven't seen it yet, but we're seeing, they're capped out with what they can do, and they were
Yeah,
already at
right.
capacity with what they could do. And so, but they, again, SNAP is a federally funded program, and no local program can meet the need of what the federal government has a responsibility to do.
Absolutely. LaMonika, you were quoted in Time magazine last month about the growing number of people facing hunger in Washington, D.C. alone. And I'm wondering if you can talk more about that.
Yeah, so in light of the fact that we have not received the 2024, the updated USDA household food security report, what we're looking at here in the district is based off of our last report in 2023, we have about 9% of households that are experiencing food
Mm,
insecurity just in the District of Columbia. We still see a high number of older adults that are receiving and utilizing SNAP. So out of all 141,000 households, our older adults receive the highest number. So it's about a little over 24,000. And they're
wow.
the highest percentage of individuals that are receiving household. And then beyond that, we have our households with children. Um, Layer on top of that, DC and parts of Maryland also are experiencing dealing with the number of furloughed workers and workers that have been let go from the federal government since the beginning of the year. And now we're beginning to see that. I believe Capital Area Food Bank's hunger report said about 37% of individuals in DC are experiencing food insecurity, which is a little bit different than the USDA report, but it's shown that food insecurity it's maintaining the same. And what I'm really concerned about is, during the pandemic, it wasn't that food insecurity was new. It wasn't that all of a sudden, when the pandemic was here, food insecurity became a thing. That hunger has been around for a very long time. But what we saw
Right,
during the pandemic was that hunger was exacerbated. We now were able to see that I can't tell if my neighbor next door to me is experiencing food insecurity. I may be living in a relatively high income
right,
area, but I can't look at someone that lives next door to me that I have conversations with on a regular basis. I don't know if number one, they've had enough food to eat, or if they've had a challenge when it comes to accessing a food resource.
right,
I can't see that.
right,
But what we've able to see through data is that the pandemic did just that. It exacerbated hunger. It showed us that we need to respond in a greater way, and the district has done that. There's been a ton of programs that the district has initiated since the onset of the pandemic that they continue to fund to support a response to food insecurity in various different ways. That we work with several different partners in doing so. And because of that intentional dedication to increasing access to food resources in the district, we saw food insecurity numbers go from at the highest, I believe, was around 10% now to
Mm,
just under 9%.
right.
But what we're looking at right now, as a result of the high number of federal workers that have been RFID'd, the cuts to SNAP, also when we look at the cost of groceries has gone up, I think in the DC area, in the Mid-Atlantic, specifically DC, Maryland, and Virginia, food costs have gone up about a little over 2% since last year. So we're steadily
Wow.
seeing an increase of food costs. Our SNAP benefits are not keeping up with pace, as well as our incomes, our general income for those that are not receiving SNAP. It's
Right.
keeping up with pace, with the pace of how our food costs are increasing. We're running the risk of undoing all of the good work that we've done. So, the district continues to fund these programs and continues to respond. But the fact of the matter is that food insecurity continues to increase. The need is continuously there because all of these root causes continue to show themselves as
Right.
present. And if we don't make adjustments, we're going to be looking at similar situations that we encountered during the pandemic. And what are we, 5 years out from the pandemic now?
Right.
A little more
Right.
than 5 years, almost 6 years out from the pandemic, since the first onset. We're looking at redoing that and experiencing that all over again.
Incredible. God. Um, you spoke, LaMonika, about the importance of data, but the U.S. Department of Agriculture recently announced that they are discontinuing the annual report on household food security in the United States, calling it redundant. What are your thoughts?
That's ridiculous. That report is absolutely not redundant. Us as advocates, the broader community rely on that food insecurity report to help paint a picture. I have always said and will always say, we love the stories that our families share, hearing of what our families are experiencing. It breathes life into the work that we're doing, and it helps us respond in a way, but data also tells a story.
Right.
And so when we're able to see that 9%, almost 9% of households in the district are experiencing food insecurity, just over 10% of households in Maryland are experiencing food insecurity, that households with children are the highest number of households that are receiving benefits. It paints a picture of how we need to respond as a state, as a local jurisdiction, and as a country to ensure that we're number one, addressing the root causes of hunger and poverty, but also what does it do that we need to do? How can we improve our programs? How can we improve access to, again, those other root causes that are closely correlated with food? How is it that we can improve this entire food system so that we can ensure that no household is experiencing hunger or poverty? And the decision to, number one, call the report redundant and to no longer issue that report is a denial of the fact that food insecurity exists in this nation, in this country, especially among our most vulnerable residents, our older adults, our veterans, our households with disability, including those that still live in high income earning areas that are
Right.
experiencing food insecurity that we assume that they're not, because this isn't an area that we typically think about as someone who's experiencing food insecurity. So it's almost negligent because we're doing a disservice to
Mm,
households and families that are relying on our government to support and to offset what our states are doing to ensure that we live in a nation that is free from hunger, that does not have issues when it comes to poverty, that we're adequately addressing the root causes of hunger, including that we have a livable wage, we have affordable health care, we have affordable housing, we have affordable childcare, we all are economically stable, so on and so forth.
Absolutely. The negligence that is happening is I don't have words for what's happening right now. LaMonika, I wanna I wanna leave this conversation with a call to action from you for our listeners, for our viewers.
Yeah, I think, the immediate call to action that we have right now, there's a couple things that are on the table in terms of um, our response to hunger and our SNAP benefits. I just implore people to please reach out to their local legislators, their senators, their representatives, to have a conversation with them. They're having conversations across the aisle amongst themselves, but to share their stories and the conversations that I've had with our local legislators and our local leaders here. They want to know what's going on. They have folks that are on the ground in their offices, but they don't deal with it on a basis in the same way that we do. So, definitely have regular conversations, sharing about, what are you seeing on the ground? What's happening on the ground? How can they better support, clients in their individual jurisdictions, in their states, in their communities. Outside of that, continue to support our food banks, our food pantries, as best you can. Because the need is going to continue to increase. Again, we're a couple weeks out from Thanksgiving, and outside of the situation that we're currently going through, this is the time that households and individuals, our older adults, disabled households, our vulnerable households, the need increases during the holiday season. So
Right.
I encourage people to support their food banks, to support their food pantries as best they can with any resources that they can. And then just at a very, very hyper local level, check on your neighbors.
Right.
I can't look at someone and assume that they have enough to eat. I don't know that, when I go to work and I'm in a meeting, that my coworker, I don't know that they're having, they didn't eat today, but they made sure that their child ate. Um,
Sure.
I don't know that by looking at someone. You can't see that, you can't assume that. But at a very hyper local level, check on your neighbors. Be a community resource source where you can, but above all else, at a much higher level and threshold, you know let's hold our elected officials accountable to make sure that they are responding in a way that is going to support all of our households across this nation.
Absolutely. Good advice, LaMonika. Where can people find out more information about you and your work?
Absolutely. So there's a couple places and ways that folks can reach out to us. For if you're a DC resident, if you have any questions, or if you're DC based, feel free to reach out to us at info@dchunger.org. Our website is dchunger.org. Or if you are in Maryland, or have someone that is connected to Maryland, you can feel free to send us an email at info@mdhungersolutions.org. And our website is mdhungersolutions.org.
Well, Monica, I want to thank you so much. You are one of the kindest people I've ever met, and you are doing such
Oh,
hard work. Thank you so much for doing it.
thank you so much, Dani. I really, really appreciate this. It was a pleasure for me to join you this afternoon. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. Be well.
Thank you. You too.